Is the government poisoning our air? Or are those jet streams in the sky harmless today? We expose the truth behind Chemtrails conspiracy. The word conspiracy comes from a Latin word meaning to breathe as one, but today on Off the Grid, we'll have to hold our breath until we get to the bottom of this counter-conspiracy on chemtrails. Let's go to my vigilant producer, Alex Logan, who has the rundown. But Alex, I want to say something first. When I did conspiracy theory for those 3 years on television where we did the 24 episodes or whatever it turned out to be, chemtrails, people always wanted to hear about them. They always wanted me to investigate them, and for some reason it never made the cut. I didn't have full say-so on what did or didn't make the cut on the show. But chemtrails came up every year, and I found it interesting that we never did cover it, so I guess we'll do it now. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, what's your general impression of the chemtrail conspiracy, Governor? Do you think there's something there?
If they're truly putting chemicals in the air, aren't they breathing the same air? I mean, I don't see nobody walking around with gas masks on who are in the know. How do they avoid it?
Well, I actually brought my gas mask today, Governor, and later in the show we'll talk to climate scientist Captain Chemtrail Caldera. But let's start off with some fast facts about the chemtrails conspiracy. Conspiracy theorists believe that jet trails in the sky, commonly referred to as contrails, condensation trails, or vapor trails, are in fact chemtrails, chemical or biological agents sprayed by the government at high altitude for top secret reasons including mind control, population control, and weather control. In your research for American conspiracies, Governor, did you encounter anything about the government being able to control our weather?
Yeah, I did, through HAARP. They showed with HAARP that you, yes, indeed, can control and create clouds and do things like that with it. Maybe they're trying to control the weather with what they're doing up there, but to be poisoning us and to be putting things in the air that are ultimately going to harm us, aren't they likewise harming themselves? We all have to breathe that air.
Well, that's a good argument against it. And claims began in 1996 after an Air University research paper titled Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, suggested that the Air Force was conducting weather modification experiments. The purpose of the paper was part of a thesis to outline a strategy for the use of future weather modification systems to achieve military objectives, and according to the U.S. Air Force, does not reflect current military policy, practice, or capability. Do you support the government researching weather modification to fight our enemies, or is this a waste of money?
No, here's what you got. We studied that when we did HAARP, and the way I understand it best is this. We've all signed on to a treaty that we won't use the weather as a weapon for war internationally. But the loophole that they found is that it doesn't stop them from doing the experiments if they do it within your own country. You know, they're always going to find a loophole. Remember that. Any type of agreement they sign, they will find some way to circumvent it. I'm certainly not naive enough to believe that our government and our military does not try to understand climate and climate control, because that could be a huge weapon in case of war.
Well, claims for the theory include the fact that some contrails from high-flying aircraft evaporate quickly, while others, which they believe to be chemtrails, persist and grow into expansive sheets of cirrus clouds. The appearance of grid patterns through the sky, and reported outbreaks of illness after the appearance of chemtrails. What could the U.S. government really stand to gain from keeping us all sick?
Well, I don't know. And where has been an outbreak of illness? I mean, I've been all over the place and seen chemtrails in the sky, and I've never gotten sick. I've even seen them off the grid, and I don't get sick.
Well, Randall Martin, an atmospheric scientist at Dalhousie University, says, "I'm involved in a large number of experiments. We measure the suite of pollutants in the atmosphere down to the trillionth of a millimeter. If an aircraft were intentionally polluting, we would notice it." So call me a skeptic, but this one doesn't seem to have a leg to stand on. Jesse, are you buying any part of this chemtrails conspiracy?
Like I said, I do it from a very, very position of basic common sense. Why would they commit suicide themselves and put things in the air that they themselves or their loved ones could be harmed from? I can't imagine that. But then again, I suppose man will never cease to amaze me.
Well, now let's change gears and invite on an expert on geoengineering and chemtrails.
Ken Caldera. He's a climate scientist for Carnegie Institute of Science at Stanford University, and one of the first scientists to seriously explore the feasibility of proposing geoengineering techniques or scientific methods of manipulating climate. Chemical terrorists have dubbed him Captain Chemtrail, claiming he's been helping the government conduct cloud brightening experiments for years, as evidenced by streaks in the sky. I'd like to welcome Ken to Off the Grid. Ken, you got quite a resume. Now, I have to confess that I only took Sam Halloran's chemistry class in high school at Roosevelt in South Minneapolis many years ago, but I do live by common sense. And how do you end up with a name like Captain Chemtrail?
Well, it's a pretty tough thing to figure out how people draw dots together. I guess there are dots, and just the way the ancient Greeks saw stars in the sky and managed to see whole constellations, and people see a few dots and they draw a correlation in their mind that isn't any more there than the constellations are in the sky.
I can take to the bank that there's no such thing as chemtrails, that they're not putting anything out there in the sky out of the ordinary, just burning fuel and flying people around.
There's a lot more jet travel now than there was a few decades ago, and so people are seeing a lot more contrails, and people are imagining these contrails are some secret geoengineering program, but it's just ordinary jets flying around.
There isn't any validity to claim that the government's up there trying to poison the air or control the weather by the use of jets flying around?
No, there's no truth to that at all. But I actually have sympathy for the people who believe in the chemtrails, because our government lies to us about kidnapping and torturing people. It lied to us, for decades, invaded Cambodia secretly. And so it lied to us about NSA spying. And so, when a government lies to us regularly, how is ordinary citizen to know when the government's telling the truth and when it's lying? And so I think this chemtrails conspiracy shows how our government has lost its credibility.
That's very interesting you'd make a statement like that, because you're absolutely correct. I mean, government lies and lies and lies again, and I always find it ironic that when they put us in front of the government, if we lie, we go to jail.
Yeah, well, Clapper can, I don't want to change this to the NSA thing, but Clapper can say the NSA is not spying on us and he's still in office. But the basic point is that our government has lost its credibility, and so when people say the government's running a secret program, just the government denial isn't enough, and it puts scientists in a tough spot because, we don't know the Earth is round because, we never sailed around, and we trust what other people say, and we trust our own experience. We don't know, so there's very little that we learn by doing our own experiments. Most of what we know is we know because people we trust told us this. So when people we trust say, well, there's a secret government program spraying chemicals in the sky, people tend to believe it, and it's not so crazy because the government's done other crazy things. I mean, we've done Agent Orange in Vietnam and so on, and so the idea that the government would spray deadly things around is not unprecedented, but it's just in this case it happens not to be true.
Ken, are you familiar with HAARP, that thing up in Alaska where they shoot the sound waves up to the ionosphere and ricochet them back down?
I've heard of it. I'm not really familiar with it. My understanding is that they're struggling for funds. I mean, I don't know anything really about HAARP, but I could believe that maybe it's somehow affiliated. I don't want to make up new rumors, but I can imagine that it's maybe affiliated with some surveillance program or something else. I don't deny that, but the idea that it's not having anything to do with climate. The HAARP is perturbing the ionosphere. The ionosphere isn't even in climate models. Nobody would even know how to modify climate by altering the ionosphere.
Well, hopefully, but the demonstrations I got shows that it can create clouds somehow.
Put it this way, as far as I understand it, HAARP is stimulating electrical activity in the ionosphere. And maybe I don't really know about ionospheric processes. I study climate in the lower atmosphere. But I can tell you that in none of our climate models, the ionosphere is not even in the model, so we wouldn't even know how to modify the ionosphere even if we wanted to.
Well, you would agree with me that you've got to admit the government sure would like to control the climate a little bit, don't you think?
Obviously, people who like power like to control whatever they can control, but I thought it was funny when all these chemtrail people were talking around that Dick Cheney is running a secret campaign to protect us from climate change. And I don't see any other evidence that Dick Cheney's worried about climate change. And the basic point is that the chemtrails is just ordinary jet contrails. As far as I know, HAARP is just a ordinary research program. And it's really the lack of trust, unfortunately, in our government.
We'll take your word on that, that it falls under the lack of trust of government, that government's kind of brought it on themselves because of lying to us for so many other things that it's very hard. And I agree with you. It's very hard for me to give my government credibility today when they just lie, and lie again to me. And it really is very difficult on that. And so I certainly, you're an expert. I want to believe your expertise. And, my big thing was, wouldn't they be poisoning themselves if they're doing this? And, and I haven't seen anybody walking around with gas masks on or anything at the time and I've been underneath chemtrails. Where do they come up with that stuff that chemtrails make people sick?
I think there were some people who picked up some dust or something and measured some aluminum, but it turns out that a lot of the soils are aluminum. Here's what I think, that scientists, they want to make new discoveries, and there are lots of scientists studying contrails and aerosols and dust and what's in lakes, and if there were really some kind of strange chemical falling down, scientists would write it up and put it into major journals, and the only people writing about these things are fringe people who are not in major journals. So then you have, I believe, there's a conspiracy to keep this out of the literature.
All right, then explain this to me then. Can't these scientists, though, haven't they been bought in by who they work for? I've always heard that they get hired by specific, if you're hired by the petroleum industry, if you're hired by whoever, you're going to give, in other words, you're going to, I guess for lack of term, you're going to give us a Warren Commission. You're going to have the answer, and then you're only going to seek what leads to that answer. That doesn't go on in that world of scientific. They can't be bought.
Well, I agree with your basic point that human psychology is such that we often tend to see things in our own self-interest as being right. But I think there are enough diversity of scientists and working in universities and so on. And I can tell you, if you could prove that there was some secret government program going on and you had all the data, that you would become a famous scientist. And so I think maybe if you're working for Monsanto or something, it wouldn't help you. But if you're working for a university or, like I am, Carnegie Institution, it would be a big feather in your cap if you could show that there was this vast conspiracy going on.
Well, Ken, thank you very much. I appreciate it for coming on Off the Grid. It's nice to talk with someone that has your credentials, and, I want to thank you. What do you think? Are you still not convinced that chemtrails are harmless? Tweet, message, or call me at the sites below. I want to hear from you as always, and stay vigilant, even in your gas masks.